Hello, hello, and welcome to the Hollywood Outsiders special WandaVision AfterHO. Today and each week after, we will be talking all about WandaVision, one episode at a time, what it means for the show, and also what it could mean for the MCU. These will be in the feed every Monday after a new episode, but if you support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Hollywood Outsider, you will usually get access by a few days, except for this week. But, you know, with holidays and stuff, you get it. Now let's get on with the show. My name is Amanda Sink, and today I'm joined by my fellow guest ho, Vinny Schwartz.
Howdy.
Howdy, sir. How you doing?
You know, we got to talk about this sir thing. It's making me feel a little older than I already do.
Okay, what would you prefer I call you?
I don't know. My name.
Just call you Vinny?
Yeah.
Hi, Vinny.
Works. Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing
Vinny?
A lot better now. Also, my joints, they work better. I'm remembering things a lot clearer. Pretty sure I lost a gray hair or two. So that's good. We're off to a good start now.
Okay. All right. Well, before we get into this, be mindful that this is full spoilers, everything that we know of up to this point, but we don't spoil anything going forward because if someone spoiled it for us, then they would be dead. So, hypothetically, let's talk about what the hex is going on. This is where we discuss our overall thoughts on the episode, some of the key characters, dissect the plot points to figure out what's going on. This episode is for episode 6, all new Halloween Spooktacular, written by Chuck Hayward. Interesting that his name is Hayward. And Peter Cameron, directed by Matt Shakman. Disturbances on Halloween separate Wanda from Vision, who looks into anomalous activity in Westview.
Ooh, anomalous.
You like that word?
That's a fun word. That's one of them $10 words.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well, go me. Give me $10.
That's not how that works.
Well, you said it was a $10 word and I said it, so I expect payment.
It's
Vinny, not sir.
Anyways, moving on.
So let's talk about some of the things that are going on in this episode. First off, Hayward is a dick, and he's definitely got his eyes on Vision, we find out through Darcy's incredible hacking ability. I didn't know astrophysicists were so technologically savvy, but...
Yeah, I was trying to think back to, like, the Thor movies, and I guess she's technically one of, like, the computer people. That's like, yeah, I'm gonna hack into the mainframe. Beep, beep, boop. Okay, we're in. Like, sure. All right, whatever moves the plot along. But, yeah, speaking just a little bit earlier, so I write my notes in, like, bullet point form, and one of them is, Sword Guy is a dick.
Well, at least we're in agreement on that. He is rude. He's just, and for no real reason. Like, everybody else understands that she is far too powerful for his tiny little human, I don't know, flesh container, and he's not going to win against her.
Yeah, he's the real antagonist. I mean, he's being stereotypical law enforcement man. I'm going to go in here and solve this with guns and explosions, and it's going to go great. Somehow. Do
you not remember what happened last time you tried attacking her?
That should have ended right there. That would have been great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's still around.
And he kicks Monica, Jimmy, and Darcy out, which was, first of all, stupid. Second of all, super rude, especially when he tells Monica that he's glad she wasn't around when her mom died. Like, who do you think you really are, sir?
And a little writing thing that I liked is Jimmy Woo was actually like, hey, we don't have time to, like, be snarky to each other, especially you. Like, let's not undercut everyone around here and just work together. And he's like, nah, get out of here.
I like that they had that at least Monica and Jimmy were on the same wavelength about their plan and just completely cut Darcy out of it. Like,
well, they figure, like, what's she going to do?
Apparently she can do everything, so why not be an ass kicker?
I mean, I guess she could distract with her snarky wit.
Yes, that she could.
She's the sassy best friend.
After they kick some sword booty, they start doing some hacking. They get a little bit more information. And thankfully, Monica and Jimmy take off in a van or a truck or whatever type of vehicle they're in to go meet up with this mysterious individual who's going to save everyone, apparently, that we still don't know who it is, but we've talked about our theories being related to Fantastic Four or Inhumans. There's different options out there. Has your theory changed?
No, but I did see one that I left out. I don't think he specializes in this area. He's just a general smart person. And that's Hank McCoy, aka Beast, from the X-Men comics.
Yeah, that one is probably a stretch. Same as Doctor Doom, but you never know if this would tie Doctor Doom in.
Right. I just saw that was a theory recently. I was like, oh yeah, I guess maybe if he wanted to go that route, but there are other characters who fit that a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, Tommy and Billy are exploring their powers and their comic costumes. And fun fact about this episode, I guess in a way that it could tie together, the first issue of the second The Vision and the Scarlet Witch series from Marvel Comics took place on Halloween night. So they do have a history of adventures around this amazing holiday, not arguably, the best holiday ever to exist. But that story had absolutely nothing to do with the events of this episode, just pointing out that they have some fun around the holidays with Halloween. Halloweeny. As
yes,
it were.
Happy Halloweeny.
But I like that they get to experiment and they get to try out their powers. We see a bit more about who they are in the comics, and that's coming to fruition here. They get their costumes, and everyone's kind of living their comic life.
Yeah, it's always neat to see the actual comic costumes get into the shows or movies or what have you in some way, shape, or form. And Marvel's usually good about changing them to be a little more modern or a little more practical. So seeing some of the more classic looks are kind of fun sometimes. Even though the whatever you call that thing on Wanda's face, it's always looked goofy to me, just a little bit.
The thing on her face, the
big red
the
crown
M?
thing. Yeah. There's a name for it. I just can't think of it right now, but I always thought it looked just a little extra goofy, but it's fine. It's cool that we get to see their powers kind of come to fruition, especially, like I said, I always thought Wiccan was a cool character. But now that we got solid confirmation that they are pretty much their comic counterparts, it's almost a given now that they're going to be tied to Mephisto somehow. And if they are, things are probably going to go badly for Wanda real quick.
I do like how fast their powers are growing, but also at the same time, because they're still children, they're like, wait a second, this is terrifying. You know, like, I don't think that's ever really thought about how just all of a sudden you can hear dad crying and possibly can feel that he's dying. And you're just like, oh man, mom, by the way, there's some bad stuff going on. I just thought I should share with you because I have these powers now. He's like, no, man, I'm scared. What do I do? So I appreciated that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something a kid who suddenly has powers would be like, I don't know what's happening. Although, for those kind of powers, now if you have super speed, you can go down, several blocks and pick up some full-size candy bars in like a half second. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's worth it. I kind of want that. Also, they must be in like a really rich neighborhood to have those full-size candy bars available.
Well, I'm sure it's whatever Wanda wants. So if it suits the story, full-size candy bars for everyone.
And their relationship with their Uncle Petey is growing and expanding, and he's kind of a terrible influence, mostly just because he's a kid himself. He's a man-child.
Right. As
the Malcolm in the Middle references say, with breaking the fourth wall.
Well, it's interesting that, he calls himself Uncle P, Peter. He never really calls himself Pietro.
And there's the differentiation between X-Men and MCU. Because the X-Men, Pietro he was referred to as Peter, whereas MCU is Pietro.
Right. So I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Take a drink.
If you're following along to the last episode, which not everybody is, Vincent.
Well, then what are you doing? Who skips podcast episodes about a sequential show? What are you even doing?
People who are testing the waters.
You're testing the waters halfway through? Okay, well, welcome. I'm sure you're real confused.
Let's talk a little bit about Pietro, because he is, at least in my opinion, mostly here in an interrogation capacity and about to get his ass beat by Wanda if he doesn't stop with the comments. I don't I do not feel like this is Pietro or it's Peter. I feel like it's some weird manifestation or someone impersonating him or taking over his body. And like, I know that we've talked a little bit about there being someone else, and they've alluded to it in this episode, who's controlling this outside of Wanda, but just is trying to keep Wanda contained and giving her happiness. And so whoever that person is, if it is Mephisto, and maybe Mephisto is pretending to be Pietro. And I just feel like they have a real hand in this creation, because it doesn't seem like it's truly one or the other. Right.
And I had a theory a couple episodes back that I'll reiterate on for those who are just now joining us for whatever reason. And I'm sure plenty of other people have had it too, where whoever made this world or helped her make this world is doing it so that they can siphon off her powers like a little bit at a time and use that for whatever gains they might be trying to achieve, which we kind of get an allusion to with the ad for the Yo Magic, where, yeah, Yo because yogurt, but it's the shark says he's eating Yo Magic and now he's not hungry. So it leads me to believe that maybe Mephisto is behind this, as we've all been saying, and he's using this as a way to siphon off her magical abilities to do something nefarious, obviously. What that could be, actually, is Mephisto has very limited powers compared to his normal powers on Earth. And recently, in the mainline continuity, he actually makes a hotel spring up out of Las Vegas so that he has a way to...
Strippers?
No, they probably have plenty of those in hell. No, it's a way for him to have a foothold on the material realm. And it ends up being a whole thing between him and Ghost Rider and some other heroes. It's a pretty interesting story. So this could be a way for him to maybe open a portal between his dimension and ours to kind of have a foothold. And
so it's literally a portal from hell, is what you're saying you think he's doing.
Possibly.
And he's bringing the big bad through that. That could make sense. And it could make sense because it seems like people or things can enter and exit as long as they existed before. Like they still existed before, because with Vision, and we'll talk about him in a little bit, obviously, but the big thing is he starts to disintegrate when he's leaving her hex field. So that's because, at least in my opinion, it's because he is exiting it and he wasn't all put together before he entered it. And yet I think if he, like when Monica went in, she was a real person all put together before she went in there. So I think you can enter and exit through that hex field if you were alive. So if the hell thing does work, it wouldn't kill them, but they would have to keep Wanda so busy with managing everything else that she can't focus her power directly into monitoring everything. Because when Tommy and Billy are freaking out because Vision is dying and he's going through that field, she doesn't even recognize it. She doesn't know it. And it takes her stopping everything in Westview to be able to focus her power and channel it to expanding that and saving him.
Right. And another way we actually get confirmation of that is the whole thing is kind of like a computer simulation.
Right.
And she's the processor. So the things around her are more active and more real, and the people behave like people should because they're putting on a show for her and her family. But as we saw when Vision starts exploring, the further out you get, the less agency she has over, like, she basically puts them on low power mode, where they either do very menial tasks or they're just frozen in place, not doing anything, because that would require too much of her processing power. So it's really bizarre and really creepy when some lady is just going through the motions of putting her decorations up and just a single tear rolls down. It's like,
yeah, it was... Yeah.
Very disturbing.
Jumping back to the Yo Magic commercial real quick, I think there was 2 other things I wanted to point out with that, aside from this being alluding to someone feeding off of Wanda's magic and that stimulating them. But also when we talked about the Infinity Stones being represented in the commercials, Soul is here when you think about it, and maybe it's a stretch, I don't know, but this kid on this island, he's the sole survivor. And so Soul is, like only, but then translated into Soul, Soul.
Right.
And the other thing of it to me was it represents Vision's capacity, where he feeds on Wanda's magic. And so this character in the commercial is dying, not being able to open the yogurt container of Yo Magic. It needs it to survive. And that's what Vision's whole being is. He needs Wanda's magic to survive. He feeds on that. And so she's being tapped in many different directions. But I think that was the other 2 components I wanted to point out to the commercial.
Yeah, I mean, the Infinity Stone tie-in I can kind of see with some, definitely more than others, so I guess we'll get a more concrete idea towards the end. But yeah, the Vision one, I could definitely see that too.
So how do you feel about Pietro? What do you think's really going on with this character, or who do you think it is?
I don't know if you want me to talk about your theory already, but you pointed out that he might be someone, and I didn't buy it at first, but upon rewatching, I was like, yeah, I guess I could see that. But he could actually be Peter Maximoff from the Fox movies, somehow in the MCU's Quicksilver's body.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said his memories are kind of jumbled. Like, he doesn't have all of them. He has some, and he calls himself Peter. So it's kind of like this weird mishmash where he does still have the powers. So it'd be weird to have just some random person impersonating him.
Right.
But also there's just things missing here and there where it doesn't quite make sense. And then the whole thing where they cast Evan Peters.
They recast Pietro.
Right. So, like, even if it's some kind of misdirection, it's just so weird to cast someone who has played the same character in a different universe as that character. So it could have totally been anyone else. And it's like, okay, yeah, this could definitely be some random...
It felt intentional.
Right. Like, it'd just be too weird to be like, oh, just kidding, it's not him at all. So I think there's some essence of him to it, but I don't know.
Well, one of the things that makes me feel like we can't trust this character, aside from him constantly interrogating Wanda, like, how did you do this? Where were the kids? Were you keeping them in their beds? Which we should probably talk about how the kids are suddenly here when they've been gone for the children. And one of the things that stood out to me, because there's always, with MCU, you can take everything in the background and it means something. When you're looking at the screen setup in Westview's Town Square Scare, it's playing Night of the Living Dead. And that's basically a movie about, saying when you see a familiar face crawling its way to you, close the damn door and hide because you can't trust that. And to me, and it happened in a moment where Pietro is around. I don't know. It just, to me, that's where I was tying those 2 things into, and it makes sense the most.
Yeah, I could totally see that. And then also at this point, though, I could totally see them throwing things in there like, watch, we're going to put this little thing in there, and then the fans are going to go insane trying to figure out what it means, and it's going to be nothing.
And that's entirely possible, because if we talk about we haven't even really talked about the scope of the show being very kind of skipping 90s for the most part and jumping to the 2000s with Malcolm in the Middle. And in the lyrics for the song, it's kind of about just sit back and watch. Like, that's what part of the lyrics are, is telling you to like just chill out and watch it and enjoy it, versus us theorizing on every detail. Now, I don't know if that's really what it means. I don't know if you have a different interpretation of the lyrics, but that's certainly one aspect that it could be.
I mean, yeah, it could definitely be referring to us and or the people in Westview. Like, even if everything is an illusion, it doesn't matter. Just kind of sit back and let it keep going. So, yeah, I could see it being us as well. Just watch how everything unfolds. It doesn't matter anyways.
Well, we should probably talk about the big stuff, which really revolves around Vision, because not only does he lie to Wanda about his plans for the evening, he did so to investigate the truth. He's really trying to find his way around Westview, talk to people, see what's going on, and what he finds out terrifies him. And we've talked before about how Vision didn't fully feel like Vision in a lot of those moments, and it could be because Wanda was controlling him, whereas now in this part of the episode, she's obviously not. She doesn't seem to have any control over him, otherwise he wouldn't have found out as much information as he did. He is finding out some dark truths, not only to the moment you talked about where people seem computerized, where there's not enough capacity to hold on to them, but he sees Agnes. He sees when he floats up into the sky and he is observing, and there's life and city and lights all happening near Wanda. When he turns to another part of town, it's completely black. And there's this one car sitting there, and it's Agnes. And it's right at the street that she had told her kids not to go past, which is Ellis Avenue. Now, I guess before we jump into Vision, I want to touch base on this. Do you think that it has significance to anything, the Ellis Avenue name, as one question? And my second question, what do you think happens to the kids if they go past it?
I did look at that a little bit, and I think there was like someone on like the production side with the last name Ellis or something, but it wasn't super significant. But as far as what happens to the kids, I'm not really sure, because as we've seen before with like Monica's clothes, she came in wearing clothes, and then to fit the era, Wanda's magic changed them to look, more era appropriate. Mm-hmm. So when she left, she still had them on. Now, when we see Vision trying to escape, we're pretty sure that this is his body being corpse puppeted around. Sorry, I had to bring up that phrase again. And so we see as he's trying to leave, he's just being pulled apart piece by piece, and he's not fully escaped from the field. Like, we see it really pulling at him. And if you know about Vision and his abilities, he can change the density of his molecules, so he can move extremely fast, like through things. And for this magic to have such a hold on him, it must be really powerful. And we see it just grind him to a halt where he just collapses in the field. So if this is just his body and it's somehow a consciousness created by Wanda just in there, it's really interesting to see that it can't quite escape. It can make it out, so we see that he can at least do that, but just not very far. So imagining what would happen to these kids, it's kind of up in the air. The same thing could happen to them, or maybe because they have their own agency, which we've seen because she can't use her powers on them, and they aged up at will and then developed their own powers, maybe they have enough agency to make it out and be fine, especially if we're going along with our theories with the comics and whatnot, how they're also created with shards of Mephisto's soul or something along those lines in this continuity. So yeah, it's kind of up in the air, really.
Well, I think you make a good point about the kids, because they were created in some capacity, but they have their own agency that's beyond Wanda's control, and maybe someone else is controlling them, or they just have that piece of Mephisto, which ties back to our entire Mephisto theory of him being at the helm of a lot of this. But I do think that, at least to Wanda's perspective, she does not think that they can survive going past that point, because she specifically tells them, and she must have told them many times before, because they did that, standard teenage kid thing where they're like, yes, we know, Mom, because she's told them so many times, don't go past Ellis Avenue. So they know it, and she at least fears that they won't survive. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't, to your point, to Vinny's point, that they can control it on their own. We haven't seen them test it out. We just know that, at least from Wanda's perspective, they wouldn't survive.
And again, she probably...
Or she doesn't want them to question.
Right. And she probably knows about as much as we do. So I think it'll be the next couple episodes, especially since they have said they're going to be an hour long now. It's going to be just craziness. Nothing but nonstop craziness for the next couple. So see how it goes.
This was already craziness. We should jump back to Agnes because there's some key things that we haven't touched base on. Her state, her mental state, when Vision taps her and brings her back to reality. Dead, dead, dead. She tells him that he's dead. He doesn't remember being an Avenger. And she seems really, I don't know, just like I don't want to say that she has no power, but that's been our assumption up to this point, is that she's Agatha Harkness. So, Vinny, this is something you pointed out offline this conversation, that if she were Agatha in that moment, she probably would have used some powers. So does that change our perspective on her being Agatha?
I mean, a little bit, but with this show and with the MCU in general, who knows what can happen? Like I said, the next couple episodes are going to be nothing but craziness. And as we get a glimpse of with Monica, just going through once is pretty life-changing, and going through twice, it's completely restructuring her body on a molecular basis, which, you know, we're getting that long, slow burn of her eventually getting her powers. So this also brings up the idea, well, this could also do the same thing to everyone else here. So another theory I have, I mean, we kind of talked about this before, this could be the creation of the Inhumans or possibly even the mutants. So what if when this hex goes away, or when everyone gets pushed out, or whatever they decide to do with this, what if that's what gives her her powers finally? Could be an idea. Or there's still, I believe might be some kind of connection between her and Darcy due to the new promotional stuff that they made with Darcy's poster, and I pointed that out last episode. But for those of you who are, for whatever reason, are just now joining us, Darcy and Agnes are the only characters with staticky TVs on their character posters. And when we saw the hex expanding, Darcy's the only one we don't get to see what happens to when she gets enveloped, which I think is very interesting. So I think she's going to have something crazy happen to her. She's going to have powers or something. That's actually the number one thing I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, I agree. And I think to your point, the posters had that, it almost looked television-y, but it was also, it's kind of what the static looks like when it consumes her body, and the lines are there, that red, static, if you will. So I think that that's really what it's an allusion to, and I think you're going to find credibility in the next episode to your theory that this brings power to Darcy, if not, makes her Agatha Harkness.
Right. She could either be a real Agatha Harkness, or another theory I've been kind of kicking around is she's going to be the final piece for this group called the Salem 7, which were created by Agatha's son. So maybe they have a role to play in this, and maybe she needs to be the final person. Maybe all of them coming together are finally going to be what's going to be a catalyst for something bigger. I don't know. Crazy fan theories.
We have lots of them. Well, before we head into the Vision, where we're going to solidify what we see going forward as our theories and how it connects to the MCU, let's talk about some of those Easter eggs that were found in this episode. Obviously,
with all the heroes' costumes, we get, classic Scarlet Witch, Vision, and
Yay!
Quicksilver costumes as well. The kids, being Speed and Wiccan, have costumes similar to their comic book counterparts. We also see Agnes in a witch costume. Further, just like I said, just really, really hinting at it, but at the same time, like, maybe she is, maybe she isn't.
Is it too easy at this point?
Right.
Like, are they being too on the nose? Is where I start to be like, this seems too obvious now. Like, I feel like they know fans already have these theories, so to put her in a witch costume is like either to tease and make fun of us that we're so wrong, or just to be like, here's a quick one. We'll give this one to you.
Like I said earlier, I'm sure, if not now, eventually at some point, talking about more fan theories and speculation, and at this point, they could just put anything in there to watch us go nuts, and it'd totally be absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's possible.
We also get a sly little nod to the Kick-Ass movies, as Billy says Kick-Ass and Wanda repeats it, which both versions of Quicksilver have been in.
That one was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Kick-Ass? Wait a second. Were both of my brothers in this? And one of the things that we were talking about is the movies existing in this world means that this movie could actually exist in the world. This movie being Kick-Ass.
Right, because we also have, later on the marquee, they have a double showing of Incredibles and
The Parent Trap. Yeah. Probably the 1998 one, just based on timing.
Most likely. And that's also interesting because The Incredibles is about a family of superheroes. And then you have Parent Trap, which is about twins trying to play tricks and get their parents back together, yada yada. But it could be hinting further at maybe this Pietro isn't who he says he is. Maybe he's someone else entirely.
That's a good theory. Any other Easter eggs?
No real ones, but another interesting character that's in Kick-Ass is one wonderful Nicolas Cage.
Oh my god.
Does this mean that we're going to get Nick Cage back? Nick Cage is Ghost Rider.
No.
Come on.
No.
Come on. Do you know how fun that would be? You got all these stoic... you got some characters that are pretty funny just because that's part of how they're written, but then you have Nick Cage, who's just Nick Cage next to, the new Captain America. Do you know how insane that would be?
Insane in the membrane.
And I want him written a little bit crazier,
I think he's crazy enough.
Like Face Off Nick Cage.
No. No.
Face Off Nick Cage as Ghost Rider with Deadpool.
Is this what the sequel is going to be about that they're coming out with? Adam Wingard, what are you doing? All right, so that's it for Easter eggs, but we're going to hop into the vision where we do talk about what we see going forward and how it connects to the MCU. What are your final real theories? I know we talked about a ton of possible theories, but what are you holding very strong to, and what do you expect in the next episode?
So I think the whole thing about him possibly being Mephisto, or at the very least, maybe Mephisto has a hand in bringing him back. Not quite the right one, but one that's alive in a different dimension and kind of using him to further heighten Wanda's emotions, which we've seen affect her abilities. So I think this all has to do with Wanda's powers and whoever's behind all this using them to some extent to fulfill whatever kind of horrible ends they mean. And, I mean, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. It's Mephisto, but who knows? Maybe it's Howard the Duck. Very unlikely. Just a joke. But I could definitely see that happening where it's not really him. It's some kind of weird amalgamation that Mephisto's using. And eventually, Vision and Wanda are going to come to a head because, as we saw in this episode, he's pretty much over this whole delusion. Like when she remarks on his costume, at first, his real self kind of comes out. He's like, well, that was the only thing in my closet because that's what's on the script, basically. And she's like, excuse you? And he's like, just kidding. Haha, you're so funny. Oh, I love this. I love all this. This is so great. And then as soon as he's like, nope, got to find out what's going on. This is not cool. So I think they're going to come to blows eventually.
Well, especially now that he's trying to save all of these people and they've listed Wanda as being the villain here. And I truly don't think that she is the main villain. I think she's just trying to keep herself sane and happy to the best of her ability because as she tells Pietro, she was miserable. She was so sad and lonely. I mean, I get it. I would be too, but there's limitations that need to exist for her.
And I could see her being an antagonist.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the villain, just like protagonist doesn't mean the hero. It just means someone who's creating a conflict against the protagonist, which could technically be Monica, Jimmy, Vision. So she's not necessarily, quote unquote, the bad person. She's not the villain. She's just, because of her actions, she's creating kind of a negative confrontation.
Yeah.
And that's just due to this all being like basically her big grief therapy session. A very extreme magical field therapy session. So we got possible Peter Mephisto ties. We got Vision and Wanda really going at it eventually. I mean, they had that little in the air tiff an episode 2 or 2 ago. And then I think they're going to save the Monica Powers thing for the very end so that they can put her in another show or a movie.
Or Doctor Strange.
Right. Or, and like I said, or a movie with powers. So I think also the Hex is a catalyst for either the Inhumans or the X-Men. I'm really buying that a lot more now.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, I think Darcy has a bigger role to play with this story.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on all of that, so I'm not going to repeat it. The one thing that I'm going to say in addition to that is I do wonder, I feel like they're going to be bringing Doctor Strange in soon. Is he the one that Monica is bringing in to help?
I mean, he does have to be introduced. They've already kind of spoiled that he's showing up. Maybe they're saving him for the last episode. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like he's probably going to have to come in to remediate a lot of this that's going on. And it's going to take someone with a lot of power and to be able to fight Wanda's power. Not to say that he can handle that, but you know, if Pietro is like a sword impersonator or like Mephisto managed, they're going to need someone who can handle the multiverse piece of it. And that's where Doctor Strange comes in. I mean, that's what his next movie is all about, is the multiverse. So I feel like he has an important role to play regardless coming up soon. And I hope that it's in the next episode. And keeping in mind, these have all been about 20 to 30 minutes, with these next episodes being an hour long, aka probably only 45 minutes with all of the long credits. That's nearly double what we're usually getting. So we still have quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how much story we can get through still.
Right.
So.
And you do bring up a good point that he's going to have to deal with this. And I think that's definitely what's going to happen. There's going to be some extra dimensional shattering, I think, by the end of this. And it's going to set off something that he's going to have to come check it out, which is going to lead into, you know, the next Doctor Strange and Spider-Man movies.
Yep.
See, I'm just saying, you can get Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. You can definitely get Nick Cage back as Ghost Rider, because why not? Oh, so to give you some additional information, I forgot I had some notes on this about my Uncle Peter Mephisto theory. He says a lot of words, or two different phrases, but this is still a pretty short episode. Right.
He says 2 different phrases that are very hell-oriented, where he says, unleash hell, demons spawn, and then he says, damn it if Westview, New Jersey isn't charming as hell. So that, to me, also lends some credibility to the potential, like, we're giving you some foreshadowing for this Mephisto concept.
Right.
And I feel like he would never, her real brother, would never be so cavalier about her husband dying. It just seemed so cruel, and it seemed like nothing that her twin would say to her. Yeah.
I those are definitely things that help me believe that that's what's going on.
Well, that's it for this episode of WandaVision AfterHO. You can find all of the Hollywood Outsiders podcast content on your favorite podcast app. You can visit our website for movie reviews, TV show reviews, all of the other Hollywood Outsider branded podcasts, including Smirk, Remake This Movie Right, Beyond Westworld, The Blacklist Exposed, and they go on and on and on. At thehollywoodoutsiders.com, you can find us on our social media channels, on Twitter @BuyPopcorn, on Facebook and LinkedIn at The Hollywood Outsider and on Instagram at The Hollywood Outsider. Be sure to subscribe for alerts of new episodes and share the show with your friends. Again, it's free to subscribe, and why wouldn't you want early alerts for new episodes like this WandaVision AfterHO? And be sure to sign up for Patreon at patreon.com/The Hollywood Outsider. To all of those current supporters, thank you so much. We appreciate you. You keep the show on the road. And remember, the next time you watch WandaVision, on your couch, buy popcorn. Dead. Dead. Dead.